Get your earballs ready. Welcome to the Greg and Tim Show podcast. Take time to sit back and relax and enjoy the show. Here are your hosts, Greg and Tim.
Well, welcome back to the Greg and Tim Show. I, as always, am Tim.
Always.
Tim Sanderson.
You are the man.
Paul Sanderson.
TPS.
That's
those
exactly,
reports.
And my dad's was Paul Michael Sanderson, so you
EMS.
get those initials too. This is my buddy Greg.
GRS.
GRS. Middle name. Do I know your middle
I
name?
don't know. I know yours.
GRS. Okay, I'm not sure. We'll talk about that later on, maybe. We are introducing now the second part
of the Dr. Dan interview.
Dr. Daniel Chenier's interview.
Yep.
And if you haven't got a chance to go to watch the first part, go back now, watch it, because we had some really good conversation. Now we're going to get into the second part.
Yep.
That's just as good, maybe even a little bit better.
I thought the first part was really
great,
good.
and this was even greater.
I guess. It depends on what you want to see.
We just got going on some conversation about some life hacks, some health hacks. Agree or disagree?
I think there was some words that were said. I don't know if it was part one or part two. I can't remember, but we had to get rid of them from the episode.
I was doing homework duty where I had to count the times that we needed to
bleep out some words.
Someone else. It was all great, but that's fine.
Oh, crap. I gotta bleep that out too.
and also, you have to stay tuned to the end of the second episode because there's a twist.
The twist ending.
And
it's M. Night Shyamalan-esque.
Yeah, you just need to stay tuned.
You'll have to see it.
It has to do with me and a surprise that Greg brings on. So you're going to enjoy it.
It's a good challenge.
More than I
thought
do.
It was fun. Yeah. Anyways, check out Chapter 2, Part 2, Number 2 of the Dr. Dan interview.
Let's roll it.
Roll it.
Grab your phone. It's podcast time. It's the Greg and Tim Show. It's the Greg and Tim Show.
So when I talk to people, and we're both big on exercise and what we put into our bodies, whenever I talk to someone, it's 100% about the scale. I want to exercise because I want to lose 10 pounds.
Right.
And if I run enough, kilometers, or if I do enough push-ups, I'm going to improve, and that scale is going to drop, and I'm going to go from 190 to 180 or whatever it is. And it's very one-dimensional.
Right.
But I always tell them, exercise is more than just dropping weight or dropping inches. There's more of a physiological mood enhancement, things like those that are way more benefits that nobody ever sees. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits of physical activity, and then maybe B, into what you put into your body as far as food is concerned?
So when it comes to physical activity, and specific forms of physical activity are better than others, but when it comes to that, even when it comes to, now the latest studies are showing, even when it comes to cognitive decline, the brain is one of your most metabolically active organs. And you can do all kinds of games like Sudoku or these word games, crosswords and things like that, and they've got all these apps and whatnot for your brain on your phone. They don't hold a candle to what physical exercise does for your cognitive skills. So that's the first thing I want to mention, because a lot of times people think, I'm going to be really smart and I'm going to do some math problems and all kinds of things to keep my brain sharp. That's fine, but not even remotely close to what physical exercise does to keep your brain sharp into old age. And it's important to, and then so the other thing is having a certain degree of lean muscle mass is also really important. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest factors now from what I'm looking at in longevity. So keeping your body strong, being able to jump off of things and land, being able to decelerate really well, because a lot of times people fall when they're older and then it's game over. They fall, break a hip, and that's it. That's done. Their whole everything goes downhill. Potentially even die shortly thereafter. So statistically speaking, so keeping a largest amount of lean. And I was always a really skinny but muscular kid, growing up. And I looked at the big football player guys. And I wanted to be like them, and I couldn't gain a pound. I was probably hovering around 4 to 6% body fat through my whole childhood up until I was probably 20-ish years old, maybe even 23 years old. And then I see these kids now in the gym who are like that and really strong. They're lifting an incredible amount of weight for their size. Yeah. And I was talking to this guy in the sauna the other day, and he's ripped. I was like, man, he's half my age. I was like you when I was 23 years old. And he's like, I want to gain 30 pounds of muscle. I want to be 195 pounds. I'm weighing 160 now. I'm like, that was me. I was 160 pounds up until I was 25 years old, and 4% body fat. And he's like, yeah, I was like, why? Why? First of all, there's nothing wrong with having a lot of lean muscle mass, but just the mass for the sake of mass alone.
Because you got to carry that still.
Exactly. And here's the thing. As you get older, from what I've seen, is you can stay lean and strong, or you can get really big and strong, but it's hard to have both equally. Okay, so really low percentage of body fat and massive amount of size as hormones change as we get older. So it's important to start that really early, to start having a good foundation of lean muscle mass at an early age. It's good metabolically, it's good for your brain. Some say it's maybe even the work that it took to get you there is also what may be helping you with the rest of the physiological functions metabolically.
So you, aside from your chiropractic practice, I notice a lot of things in the front entrance of the office.
Yeah, supplements.
Supplements, coffees, the bison liver. The other day you posted something about a thing called F-bomb.
Yeah, tallow.
And it's not a swear. It's a balm.
Yeah,
BALM.
you have to bleep that one out.
No, it's called F-bomb. And so you're in chiropractic care.
Yeah,
which is a natural
optimizing the nerve system. Yeah.
Optimizing the nerve system. How are you educating people with like food and nutrition and stuff like that?
So I have a class called my Radically Healthy class, which I hadn't done through COVID. And I'm just starting, I'm going to do another one in February, Radically Healthy 2.0, which will be very different than what I was doing pre-COVID because I'm evolving and changing in terms of my,
You're learning.
I'm learning, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not set in my ways. And I talked to you a little bit about that the other day.
Yeah.
I was a little bit set in my ways, and we can go into that in a second. But I call it my Radically Healthy class. My motto is, if you're okay with everything in moderation, if that's your motto, then you can expect health in moderation. So it's radically healthy, not just a little bit healthy, not moderately healthy class. It's radically healthy. So I go radical. I used to make smoothies with, I used to have my Vitamix there, and I'd show people, this is kind of shit that I do. I put kale and spinach and broccoli raw in the Vitamix, and I pulverize that stuff raw, and I pound it back, and sometimes put a banana or some berries to make it tasty, or a little bit of protein powder to make it tasty. And so I was plant-based back in those days. For a long time I was plant-based. Now I wasn't peanut butter and jam sandwich eating plant-based. I was plants, like eating a lot of plants, Swiss chard, all kinds of plants, raw, leafy green, pulverize it in the Vitamix, eating it on my plate. I was eating a lot of plant-based, eating meat only maybe once or twice a week. And
then something happened.
Yes.
That affected you, right?
Yeah.
And this
I had poison ivy. Got really bad around. So no, backing up even further, prior to the poison ivy, about 7-8 years ago, I was researching, listening to some of Mercola's stuff. He interviewed a guy named Dr. Paul Saladino. And we were on a road trip back then. And I thought, okay, let's listen to this clown, see what he has to say. People are really carnivore. That's ridiculous. So I listened to him. And Kathy and I looked at each other and we're like, it makes sense. Like, it's actually making sense, but we didn't really want to believe it. There was this cognitive bias.
Were you both vegetarian at that time? Okay.
Yeah. I was not as vegetarian as she was. I was kind of like, some people call it pegan, part-time vegan.
Okay.
but quite pegan. And
weekly steaks. Other than that, vegan.
What's that?
Weekly steaks. Other than that, vegan don't.
Your cheat day was a steak, and then you went back to Vita. Okay.
Yeah. And so then, after researching from a few different areas, and then looking more into Paul Saladino, and then I got a real bad bout of poison ivy. And I'd get a little poison ivy here and there once in a while in the summertime. I like to do stuff outside in the bush and whatnot, and I'd get a little spot here and there. Well, I had terrible poison ivy through the backs of both my legs, and then it was just awful. So I would fast. I was into intermittent fasting as well.
Yep.
So I'd fast from supper time all the way through for about 20 hours until maybe 2 or 3 p.m. the next day. And I found at that point, poison ivy was all drying up and it wasn't oozing anymore. And it was a lot better because there's nothing bad going in my system, except maybe water. And I was like, great, this is awesome. This is the answer right now. I'm going to fire up my Vitamix now. I'm going to break my fast with something really healthy for me. I'm going to put my kale, my spinach, my Swiss chard, some bok choy, and some broccoli. I had like about 5 really green things in there.
Yeah.
And I'll put water with it as my liquid. I'm not even going to put anything tasty like a banana or blueberries to make it palatable.
Yeah.
I'm going to go all out because I want to heal this because it's torture.
It's like the raw eggs back in the day with, what was it?
Well, the raw eggs would have been healthier for me. The raw eggs are okay, but only the yolks. Anyway, so I pounded back to break my fast, started pounding back some of this drink. And within a minute, like blowtorches on my legs, and it even started oozing. It's like irresistibly itchy and painful and burning. And I thought, okay, maybe it's a coincidence. Again, my cognitive bias was kicking in, going, this can't be. This is ridiculous. Really? What they're saying is true? Maybe. So then did it again the next day. Same thing happened. So from that moment forward, I was like, hey, nature is telling me, my body's telling me innately that they're correct. Dr. Paul Saladino is correct.
Yeah.
Dr. Paul Saladino is a medical doctor. He had terrible psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, eczema, one of those things, skin condition anyway, an autoimmune skin condition anyway. And he went all vegan and got worse. So he's like, oh, I've got to lose. I'll go all carnivore. And it healed within 6 months. 100% healed within 6 months. He realized after going carnivore, fully carnivore for 6 months, something was missing. Needed some form of carbohydrates. And so he postulated that the cleanest form of carbohydrates would be fruits and honey, as opposed to the leafy green leaves, stems, and seeds and roots of leafy green vegetables. And because those are very highly defended chemically. So we're not talking sprays that people put on them, that the farmer put on them.
From like animals.
Yeah, we're talking no from the actual plants. So
the plants are defending themselves from animals.
Exactly, from animals like us and other animals from grazing them to death and eating all their seeds, their babies. So the plant doesn't want you eating its babies. It needs to prevent itself from going extinct, so it doesn't have teeth or feet to kick you or bite you or run from you. So it must produce chemical defense system. So it produces poisons. And those poisons are usually immune disruptors and hormone disruptors in plants.
So like a poison ivy is very specific, right? It gives you.
So that one
that one is a poison.
It's poison because it's very overt.
So but how do we as humans know because obviously like foragers and gatherers and that type of thing, as back in the day, they had to eat what they could get. Right.
So here's the thing.
The fasting would happen.
So in times of starvation, they might have resorted to plant life to keep themselves alive, but the ideal
berries and stuff
the ideal would have been fruits.
Okay.
Would have been fruits, the bright fruit, like a bright ripe fruit. There's no way that wasn't attractive to our ancestors.
Okay.
Right? That would have been pretty attractive, and a honeycomb would have been pretty attractive. They would have risked, I would contend, they would have risked getting stung by bees just to get to that honeycomb.
Okay.
Occasionally. And if they had slayed the beast, then there's no way they would have said, I'm not going to take the heart out from that beast and chew on that heart versus, or the marrow, break the bones open and lick the marrow out of those bones versus I'm going to chew on that piece of kale on the forest floor for half an hour that tastes like bad.
Yeah.
You have to bleep that one out.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not palatable.
Yeah.
And it's chewy versus I'm going to lick the marrow out of that thing. That to me is ancestral. So again, with my cognitive bias, I tried to justify, no, this is good for me, and you got to prepare it certain ways to make it taste okay.
Yeah.
No, so they all have their poisons. Poison ivy is a very overt one.
Yeah.
It turns out that things like cashews are in the same family as poison ivy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, interesting. And kale, for example, has goiterogenic compounds in it, which is bad for the thyroid.
Okay.
Spinach, high in oxalates, calcium oxalate, which causes calcification in parts of the body where you don't want it.
So, to people that eat this, is it good in moderation?
Like, so here's the thing.
For you in
I
moderation?
believe plants, and this is what a lot of these sort of people like Paul said, plants would be used as medicine. So either in times of starvation or as medicine. Yeah, in small amounts as medicine for their medicinal properties, but not as a source of calories necessarily. Not as your ideal source of calories is what I've concluded at this point. Right. We're all coming from sort of different lineages along the way. So for a person who's been maybe raised on a naan bread for thousands of years, so it's a form of wheat, they might have the gut bacteria that breaks that down and breaks down the gluten and breaks down the lectins in certain foods more effectively than you or I.
So I have the gluten thing amazes me sometimes right now because there's a very big gluten intolerance in the world now compared to when I was a child. Like I feel like a lot of kids are intolerant to gluten. Is it a difference in the way that they're making the food?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it really gluten? Is it that more people are intolerant to gluten, or is it that we have a genetically modified form of wheat? You know, you'll have friends who've been to Europe
and stuff like that.
Can I just interject here for 2 seconds? So, and then the other question is, are there more gluten intolerances now, or did we just not recognize them 100 years ago?
Those are all
that's
good questions.
That's the question that I would have.
Those are all valid questions. I would contend that there are more now because of some of the way we're processing or growing the wheat, whether it be like Roundup Ready type of stuff, GMO stuff, which is banned in a lot of other countries in Europe. So people travel to Europe. A lot of patients who come back from Europe, they'll say, I ate bread and cheese all day long, had no problems whatsoever. Can't even touch it here. Yeah. So there's a difference. Yeah.
Apparently, like the bread in like in France and stuff like that Spain is much different, like in terms of texture and taste.
Well, a lot of those countries, it's actually a ban on GMOs.
Okay.
So they have a different wheat.
Well, we talked about milk. In one of the
A2
first
cows.
Episodes, that how it's produced now versus 100 years ago is totally different, and we don't have that ability to digest it properly.
Well, there's a form of casein. Dr. Gundry speaks to that in his book, The Plant Paradox, and he speaks to a lot of the plant poisons as well in The Plant Paradox. The cardiologist, one of the most renowned cardiologists on the planet, and he speaks to the poisons in certain plants, but he still doesn't go quite as deep of a dive as Saladino, but he talks about A2 cows versus A1 cows. A1 cows produce a lot more milk, but they produce a different type of casein, whereas A2 cows, it might be, for all the agricultural people out there and farmers, they might correct me on this, but the A2 cows have either no casein or a different type of casein, which is easier to digest, but they don't produce the massive quantities that the A1 cows produce. So in North America,
need to produce the massive
they need that for the
population is growing, right? So
that and just more profitable, I guess. Yeah. But in Spain, apparently south of Spain, they use a lot of A2 cows. But now you can find A2 milk on the shelves even in North America.
Okay.
At your stores here in Winnipeg carry.
So milk, what's your thoughts on like almond milk and?
So they're highly processed. Soy. I mean, back in my vegan days, soy's not meant for human consumption.
Yeah.
Back in my vegan days, and and again, hormone disruptor. No.
Okay. Cool.
So I'm going to just push back a little bit and be a devil's advocate on this. So you're talking about the carnivore diet, which some people may or may not have heard about. Lots of meats, very little of the green veggies. But for years and years and years, we were taught by our parents, by our grandparents, eat your vegetables. And the more green, the better. But you're saying that these are actually not good for you to ingest in that form.
I've come to grips with that. There are varying degrees of poisons in those leafy greens, degrees of poisonousness. That's a word.
So vegetables that you suggest, though, are like root vegetables, like carrots.
Yeah. Yams might be a little bit less invasive in terms of the defense chemicals in them, but still to a certain degree, the root vegetables. And so, for example, the myth has been brown rice. Whole grain brown rice it has compounds in it. One compound called WGA, which actually mimics insulin. So it plugs up your insulin receptors and causes long-term consumption of it will cause type 2 diabetes.
So people that think they're eating healthy with brown rice.
Yeah, because it slows the spike of blood sugar, right? Yeah. Sure, it does, because you got the germ in there, you got the fiber. And so it slows the spike of blood sugar more than if you were eating white rice. However, the white rice doesn't have that WGA in it. It doesn't mimic insulin. So it's that hormone mimicry that a lot of these compounds have that are really bad. And it'll cause diabetes long-term.
And you kind of hinted at it as far as why we think certain things are healthy for us going back in history, whether it's milk, whether it's brown rice, right? We have these campaigns that will convince you that they are healthy for you for profitability, right?
I mean, you've heard about the Kellogg's thing. I haven't verified this, but many sources talk about this now. It's not a secret. The guy was a weirdo, and he wanted to disrupt people's hormones. He did not want people to have sex hormones surging through their bodies.
I actually watched the documentary, The Kellogg Brothers.
Okay.
I think it was Minnesota, Rochester or something like that, where they started.
Rochester's in
they did have some crazy ideas. Yeah. I haven't heard specifically that claim, but I wouldn't doubt it based on what I heard.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to start rumors, but I have heard it from many sources that was part of their motive for starting the cereal thing.
In the end, to put a bow on this, in the end, it's really hard to eat something and know that it is good for you these days, if you were to suggest right now a meal that you could only eat every day, what would that meal be?
And actually, while you're thinking, and think about this for 2 seconds, just give yourself an extra second, and add to that exercises to do and avoid after you're done that question.
Okay, yeah. So two good questions. So, and again, to go back a little further to correct, you said I was referring to carnivore. Not really referring to carnivore, because carnivore would be just meat. Be like some people call it the lion or the feline diet, where they're eating just steak. And there are people who do that and get great results. And then there's carnivore-ish, which is kind of more what I'm following, Dr. Paul Saladino's style. And again, I'll still eat some carbohydrates if the kids have pizza, and I might have a slice if I'm finishing off whatever.
So we'll get the links to the things that you're suggesting. We'll put them in the comments here. The Paul Saladino diet and everything like that.
So, but just to clarify the difference here, so you have people who have great results on these diets for various reasons. There are people with autoimmune that have to be really strict, and they can't touch any of these defense chemical foods. And again, the plant life will have varying degrees of them. So I used to think back in my vegan days, iceberg lettuce, that's ridiculous. It's just water and fiber. You're wasting your time and money. You got to eat the stuff like the leafy greens, right? Those organic leafy greens. So I used to love that stuff. Full of kale, full of baby spinach and other baby weeds, basically, that are loaded with defense chemicals.
Yeah.
So now I avoid that altogether. If I feel like crunchy salad, I'll do either a crunchy romaine, or organic iceberg. And here's the thing. I would contend that you're getting benefits from some of these from the produce, from not necessarily the green stuff you're eating, because that is loaded with defense chemicals, but from the structured water that's in there. So water has different properties, and water is not water. It's not all the same. So you can do a deep dive into water, but for me, in my opinion, the structured water that's in those plants is what's really good for you.
Yeah.
And you want to choose the ones that have the least chemicals beyond that. Least defense chemicals, not again sprayed chemicals from Roundup and things like that. We're talking like inherent to the plant, the poisons that the plant created. So back to foods that are least.
So your last meal that you're going to eat for the rest of your life,
goodness,
and you're going to live till you're 105 years old,
and I'm only going to eat that meal for the rest of my life.
And the reason why you eat it is because it's going to make you live till you're 105. It's going to keep you healthy. What right now?
So it probably involves some organs, and I was touching on that when I said, it's important to distinguish between pure carnivore, where they're just eating the muscle tissue of animals, versus nose to tail eating, which is really important. So it would probably consist of, and that ties into your question, my last meal would probably consist of nose to tail eating of some kind, involving some organs and bone marrow. The particular organs that I'm a fan of are the heart and the liver. Of big game. Bison is my go-to.
Okay.
Grass-fed, grass-finished bison. And honey and fruits, particularly berries, I'm a big fan of.
Yep. So those would be your desserts.
Yeah, those would be go-to stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the exercise, if you obviously you can't just do one exercise for the rest of your life,
right?
But an exercise that you would do on a regular basis to get to that lean.
A couple good ones that I get a lot of bang for my buck with lately. I like heavy lifts, and beyond that, on the days where if I've lifted heavy and I'm a little too stiff, sort of my zone 2, if you will be on a spin style bike. So I like to do zone 2 exercise, which is kind of, just for people who aren't aware, the zone 2 is a really good way to train certain metabolic pathways in the body that are in, you're using oxygen. Okay, so you're below the lactate threshold.
Okay.
So you're not to the point where your body's producing more lactate than it can recycle efficiently. So once you reach, zone 2 is below that. So as soon as you tip the scale beyond that, now you're in other metabolic pathways, which are still going to benefit you. But zone 2 is what is shown to really help the mitochondrial health.
So the spin bike, does it have any other kind? Like you said, a spin bike.
Yeah. Is
it because it's less on your joints and stuff like that? Is that why you pick a spin bike?
I just like it. I'm not a huge fan of running and jogging. I find it really boring.
So other than the fact that it's hard on your joints, and I'm a big runner, so I always push back on you. Is it that it is hard on your joints for running?
So for running, that's one thing, and you have to. It's for me. Again, you're a seasoned runner. You probably can keep yourself in that zone 2 with a certain pace of running. For me, being on the bike, you can manipulate the tension, manipulate the gears and stuff like that, so that you can keep yourself in zone 2 and not go beyond that lactate threshold.
The one thing I can't do on a bike is my butt. My butt hurts so much.
Your butt hurts a lot. Yeah. So again, you pick your poison. But so the other thing that I like, also very efficient, is the assault bike. You guys ever tried an assault bike?
No.
So it's got the arms and the legs that are going at the same time. So you're
pedaling.
You're pedaling and moving your arms simultaneously. So you're demanding blood supply, oxygen-rich blood supply, nutrient-rich blood supply to your arms and legs. And that one I like to do more intervals on, though. So that and beyond zone 2.
We should make a radical assault bike. Yeah. We should invent.
What would that consist of, though?
Well, I don't know. You eat while you eat a liver. You eat a raw liver.
A liver dangling in front of it.
Well, that's a terrible idea.
A hard time selling that one. I don't know. But that one is it's called assault bike. It hurts in a different hurt kind of way. Like, you get a muscle hurt.
It hurts good though.
Yeah, it hurts good, but it's almost like almost like a nauseous hurt after you really sprint hard. Because you can sprint hard on those ones to do interval training. Really, really push the limit to how hard you're going for only like 10 seconds. I do 10-second intervals with that one, so it's a really short interval, and then a minute of recovery time, and then 10-second really, really, really hard. And it shows you how many watts you're hitting during that sprint, and so you can kind of know what kind of watts you're capable of and what you want to aim for.
Wait a minute. Do you know who makes the assault bike?
So I think it's a company named Rogue, but there may be other brands as well.
Okay. We got to talk to Rogue. Maybe Rogue's listening right now. We can get them
that'd be sweet.
You can get on the ground floor of sponsoring.
Ground floor of sponsoring the major podcast of the year. And Tim will take on that challenge of riding that Rogue bike, and he'll stop running and check to see how much difference that makes for him, right? If we got Rogue on as a sponsor.
I'm in.
Otherwise, it's probably going to be expensive.
Yeah, because Greg only does things in moderation, so exercise would be one of them. So yes, I will do it.
Exercise in moderation. I eat in moderation, I hope. I try to anyway. But speaking of challenges, I want to challenge yourself and Tim. Tim doesn't know about this challenge yet.
I have no idea.
But the challenge is going to be something that I think that you're going to be able to do, and Tim's going to be able to do. You remember Wim Hof, right? Wim Hof.
Yeah.
I don't know if you still do this or not. I don't know if you still follow his practices or not. We'll get into that in just a second. But I want to challenge you and Tim to do some Wim Hof breath work, which we'll explain in a second. And after the breath work, we're going to sit in the snow for as long as we can. I got the hot tub open. For you, Tim. And we're gonna sit in the hot tub afterwards if we want to. But do you still practice Wim Hof?
In cold showers, yeah. The breathing practice. I have actually another breathing practice that I use that's a little more refined, but yeah.
Okay.
So long, basically, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about Wim Hof, but that's the challenge I'm in.
Yeah, you're in. Okay,
just answer that question. Yeah,
I'm in, but terrified.
In but terrified. Okay.
Well,
awesome.
And let's face it, it's not. No matter how much you've practiced it, it's never like. Even Wim Hof says, it's not like I like the cold.
Yeah,
it's still cold.
Yeah,
it still hurts.
He's embracing
hard things. Yeah, difficult things are just a good thing to do in life.
Yeah,
embracing the suck. My friend says embracing the suck was what he says.
Yeah. And the thing I love about Wim Hof, or one of the things, is his philosophy. Even though he's got that 3-pronged approach, which is a breathing practice, cold immersion, and focused attention, sort of meditative focus. But beyond that, his philosophy is one that ancestrally we were faced with hardships.
Yeah,
and we had stress. When we had stress, it was you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. You're going to have to run and fight for your life.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to run and fight for your next meal. Or you're going to starve for a period of time.
You're going to carry that meal home.
Right, exactly. You're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to do hard things, uncomfortable things. In today's culture, we're comfortable 24/7.
And fasting is one of those things that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah. So fasting and heavy lifting and hard exercises, those are all things that mimic sort of the successful hunt, as they say, which you would have had to have done if you were going to eat your next meal.
So what Wim Hof does, though, is he makes you do the breath work first. So like for me, I'll take cold showers. I'm 3 years in cold showers. How long have you been doing cold showers?
Long time, since pre-COVID for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I read his book and I've learned his breath work and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that I like is that he gives you the tools to like do your breathing. You do 30 deep breaths and then you hold on the out and then you suck in a big breath and you hold on the in, and then you do it again. Then you do it all over again. And what breath work is supposed to do for you is it's supposed to actually allow your body to reset in some sort, right?
Like a pattern interrupt.
Yeah, like if you're in a stressful situation, or if you're angry, or if you're in a position where you need to be reset, the breath work is supposed to help you reset. Is that something that
it changes your state, that's for sure. Yeah. The breath work will change your state. The cold immersion will change your state big time.
Yep.
I've suggested for people who are prone to panic attacks as a sort of first aid measure. First of all, we have to figure out, get to the bottom of it and change the physiology in a more sustainable level. But as a first aid measure, cold immersion is a really good first aid measure for a panic attack. Yep. The trigeminal, particularly on the face, so the main sensory nerve to the face and head is the trigeminal nerve, and it's one of the most sensitive nerves on the body. It's very, very sensitive to pain, and turns out to cold sensitivity. So it monitors the cold in the environment.
Yeah.
And so by full immersion, particularly immersion into cold water, full face immersion, it elicits what they call the mammalian diving reflex, which slows your heart rate right down.
Yeah.
And everything metabolically just kind of calms right down. So that has an effect on your physiology as well as brain chemistry. The effects that are shown now, the studies coming out on cold immersion and dopamine release, it's like a nice steady release over the next several hours following the cold immersion process, which is again more sustainable than having a dopamine release from checking your messages on your phone or checking Instagram on your phone.
It's actually supposed to be when you do a cold shower in the morning, it's supposed to actually be like having 10 coffees.
Wow!
Right? Like it's supposed to actually give you that,
but in a sustainable way. It's a jolt of adrenaline,
in your
really.
Body, right?
Yeah.
Because your body's facing stress for the first time of the day.
That's right.
Right, and when you're doing that stress, it's a controlled stress.
Yeah.
Right, and it's coming. The other thing they say is when you do the cold showers, it actually will make your body. You battled your first obstacle.
The first hard thing.
We talked about this earlier. Yeah. Obstacle is the way, right?
Yeah.
You've faced a first obstacle already, which teaches your body that it can do things that you didn't think it could do.
So if that's the hardest thing you're going to face that day, you got it nailed first thing in the morning. And
triggers it in your brain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I got a cold water story about me and Tim way back in the day. So me and Tim went to Kitsilano Beach in Vancouver. We were there in October last year?
2022.
Yeah, October of last year. So we went there thinking, okay, it's a beach. It's like 17, 18 degrees. We're going to enjoy it. We brought our bathing suits. We're going to go check out the ocean. He dips his toe and is like, whoa. It was probably between like 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. For Americans, I don't know what the difference is. So I'm sorry. But 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. And so I'm like, we're going to go in. So we just get into our bathing suits.
And I think maybe I'm going to go in for 45 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, maybe max.
Because he knows that I do the cold stuff, right? So we go in and we get all the way up to our shoulders. And I'll put up a picture of us in the water here, all the way up to our shoulders. And he's like, "Okay, are we going in now?" I'm like, "No, I'm gonna stick out. I'm gonna stick it out for a little while." He's like, "Well, I can't be the first one out." So he sat in there with me, and
sat.
I think it was like 20-something minutes.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, Greg, are we getting out now? Are we getting out?" I'm like, "No, this is like," because your body gets used to these things.
It adapts.
Too, right? And you know how it gets used to over time it gets used to it? It didn't get used to it from
his core temperature never caught up. Year and a half later?
Yeah, it's
still cold. But like when you train your body, whether it be exercise or whether it be cold immersion or breath work and all that the breath work's actually supposed to help you also be able to hold your breath underwater for longer periods of time, because you're training your body that it has enough, right?
Yes, but you gotta be careful with that. Like, don't go out and do like a breath hold underwater. Don't want anyone to when doing this practice, because what happens is your urge to take a deep breath comes from CO2 building up in your bloodstream. And so you're expelling all your CO2 and you're saturating with oxygen. And so you don't have that big of an urge to take a deep breath. So you can do a really long breath hold while doing this particular breathing practice, it's not a good idea to do it underwater, because you'll go from, I'm comfortable to blacking out without getting that CO2, knowing that, okay, I need to take a deep breath. And so the last thing you want to do is black out underwater. So
essentially when you go underwater, you take a deep breath in before going underwater.
I can't really speak to what free divers do, but they've got their own sort of breathe up method, they call it, which is a little different than the Wim Hof. And again, it's
getting into a little something different.
Yeah, well, it's getting into the weeds there. I'm not an expert free diver. I'm fascinated by free diving. I'd love to do it, but I've looked some of it up, so I know there's this breathe up method, which is different than the Wim Hof, because the Wim Hof will allow you to hold your breath for a very long time, but it also will take you to that tipping point where you could easily black out if you're doing a free dive. And you black out when you're 10 feet underwater, 30 feet underwater is not a good idea.
And he does suggest that when you're doing like your breath work in extremes, that you should be doing it with somebody and under supervision. But when you're doing it just under like your own breath work, you can do it, but just you don't want to be extreme.
Right. So for example, I had my daughter timing me one time. This was years ago, and she was still young, maybe 7 years old. She's 13 now. She was maybe 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I was doing the Wim Hof just downstairs in my basement gym. I wasn't in the water or anything. And I held my breath for 3 minutes and 5 seconds. And then I actually took a breath. I took a breath because I stopped it, because the last thing I wanted to do is black out in front of her and freak her out and whatnot. And
exactly.
I probably wouldn't have died, but it's because I wasn't in the water, but it still wouldn't have been good to black out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I watched some of and I wasn't familiar with Wim Hof or the techniques as much as you were, and you were as well. But I watched some documentaries. I got some information this week. And it's just the backstory is quite fascinating. But again, it's a great point to know your limits. A lot of people, we talked about New Year's resolutions, will go from 0 to 100 in one day, and that's when they fail. Mm-hmm. But certainly building that up over time, and you have years of experience, so do you. Just don't try to do it overnight. Can I go back to one thing? One of the themes I hear you talking about is not treating the symptoms. So whether it's in your health, whether it's just in ideas, if something is uncomfortable, it's not necessarily bad.
Right.
And we talked off air about history and I used the example of the Great Depression, where things were hard and it was uncomfortable, but out of that bore some of the greatest technologies, some of the best innovations, some of the best companies were born out of that. And we saw this during COVID also, where businesses were shut down and some said, well, I guess we're done. And others said, no, you know what? Let's try to find more innovative ways to go and pivot and go in a different direction. And that's what I kind of hear you say, whether it's cold water therapy, whether it's what you're looking at eating.
That's the hermetic effect. So in I guess medical terminology, they call it hormesis, or the hermetic effect, which is basically that which could potentially kill you in large amounts, makes you stronger. But it's not that, like, the cold isn't good for you. The heat isn't good for you, but it's the fact that it's not good for you that makes you stronger. It's the adaptation that happens. So when you're for example, in a really hot sauna, your body produces heat shock protein at the point where it gets uncomfortable. So we're not talking like a spa day where it feels nice and warm and cozy. When it gets to the point where it's uncomfortably hot, your body's starting to produce heat shock protein, and that actually serves as protective mechanisms to heal wounds and repair tissues and protect your brain, and all kinds of things start coming up with that which your body produces. So it's the effect of having a small amount of something that's dangerous or poisonous. That's the hermetic effect. So the effect, the way your body adapts to it, is what makes you stronger potentially.
That's fantastic.
That's the hermetic effect.
Awesome.
So before we talked about the challenge already. Before we go do that,
go do the challenge.
Yeah, I have one more question to ask you.
You're not going to die, Tim.
No, I'm still worried about this. Maybe I'm delaying it a little bit by asking the question. So we talked a little bit about off air about this, but and tying it again to people when they make New Year's resolutions and try to do things all at once, and someone might listen to you and say, "Wow, I'm going to cut out all this and I'm going to exercise." I can't, people will do that for 3 weeks. And I think last week or a week ago was National Quitting Day, where on the average January 20,
so the gym's going to be not so busy.
16th, that was the average day that everyone gave up on their, and typically it's dietary or exercise related where they give up. And
so it's give up day.
And it's safe to go back to the gym because
all those, not so busy anymore.
They're gone. It's busy anymore. And we talked about the psychology of not being too hard on ourselves. What's that balance between, because I know you probably, even though you talk about this stuff, you have cheat days. You have piece of pizza once in a while. What is that balance between always trying to 100% eat healthy, live healthy, and whereas, giving ourselves the grace to, when we do fail, to take a step back and say, I'm going to keep going. Because some people will fail and they'll feel gross if they have, like, let's say a cheat day, and they'll say, no, I'm going to start harder the next day. And I feel gross. I don't want to feel this gross anymore, so I'm going to just do even harder. But some people will say, you know what? I feel gross. I am gross, and I'm quitting because I suck.
Yeah, and that is statistically shown. That statistics on those research studies that I quoted shows that is a common phenomena.
Yeah.
So it's important people have that compassion with themselves and just kind of remind yourself to not be too hard on themselves. And at the same time, you don't want to. I guess it'd be like enabling the bad habits by saying, oh, I'm too hard on myself. But I think for some people, I recommend, back to your question about how do you make it sustainable? Sustainability and lifestyle habit changes, the work that I do. And I'm not just saying this to toot my own horn. There's studies that show that when people are under network care, these lifestyle habit changes have 4 times, this is mathematically calculated through certain university research departments, 4 times the benefit. So certain lifestyle habit changes, let's say you take up a stretching practice, an exercise practice, and a better eating habit and a meditation practice.
Yeah.
And those things have X amount of impact on your life.
Yeah.
It turns out while you're under care, while you're getting your nerve system optimized with the work that I do, all those lifestyle habits have 4 times the positive impact. 4 times.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. And so I would suggest that those lifestyle habits would be even more sustainable as well if you've optimized the system, just like the lady who quit smoking without even trying to quit smoking. So if it becomes innate, like this tastes terrible, innately my body is saying no to this. Innately my body lately has been saying yes to organs and flesh and fat of grass-fed bison.
Yeah. It's
ancestral. It makes sense up here, but I was resisting it up here until my body started saying, yeah. And then it's like it makes it more sustainable. So this is to answer your question. I think optimizing and upgrading your central nervous system so that it makes those better choices innately will make those lifestyle habits more sustainable. And I am not, even though I tell people to be compassionate with themselves and not be too hard on themselves, I still think people are capable of more. And no, you're not okay behaving the way you've been behaving. You're capable of so much more.
Well, what you're talking about, and I don't know if you come from a Christian background, but we are Christians and we go to church.
Yes.
And we in the Bible, it's talk about balancing. Jesus said balancing grace and truth, where it's not one ditch and not the other ditch.
Right.
It's making sure that we try to make as good decisions as we can, but at the same time, we have the grace of not always pound.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you're not enabling the bad behaviors.
Yeah.
And I see too much of that in this soft culture that we've become. Oh, it's okay. You're good just the way you are. The body positive movement.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you get canceled for me mentioning that now, but but that's BS.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that is not healthy. And yes, you're capable of so much more. You're capable of being healthier. You're poisoning the temple. Your body's like the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you're poisoning it.
And it's one thing, body positivity, and it's another thing to be gluttonous, and you know what I mean? So I can see the body positivity, be positive about your body.
To the degree of don't be too hard on yourself and don't throw in the towel.
To get better.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. So that you don't go to that throw in the towel thing like I'm reached 400 pounds now, I might as well just throw in the towel. No. Don't be so hard on yourself, but also you're capable of more. You're capable of more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's a great point.
I think we'll end it on that. I think that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Again, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate this.
Hey, it was my pleasure.
I had a fantastic conversation.
I think we
had a great time.
Really had a great time. Yeah.
We're gonna do the cold challenge, so we're gonna cut to that in a few seconds here. But before that, if you do want to get in contact with Dr. Dan at all, and you are in the Winnipeg area, all of his information is below in the description, so you could check that out. If you're listening on Spotify, it'll be in the description as well. And thank you once again for joining us. We should go in.
You're welcome.
We should go get cold now.
Let's get cold.
Let's get cold.
Or
awesome.
not.
Let's get uncomfortable.
Let's get uncomfortable.
Comfort is the enemy to growth.
We can.
Yeah, so I was saying how I did it minus 40, or no, minus 39, and it was, I got frostbite on my feet when about a week later, I was on the place, or 4 or 5 days later, I was on the place.
Wow. Picture that story, you jack.
You sit down.
A week later, I got frostbite.
Just watch out
Thanks,
for the yellow
Dr.
snow.
Dad.
Yeah, don't go in
You're
the pile.
the best.
Don't go in the pile over there.
Watch out. Okay, are we doing snow angels or?
We'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Once you're done in the cold.
So this is where the focused attention from the Wim Hof comes in.
Don't focus on the cold. Focus on your body.
So you're not dying. That your body, your trigeminal nerve is telling you that you're going over a snow-capped mountain, and it should sacrifice your toes and fingers, so thus create a forceful constriction in the blood vessels. And that's a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
If you're really going to be dying. But right now, you know you're not going to die. You know warming up is minutes away.
Yeah.
So try and keep those blood vessels open and blood circulating. Okay? Breathe through it. The constriction can be painful, especially in the extremities.
How are you feeling, Tim?
I want to go in the hot tub. Every second of my body's thinking about quitting and going in the hot tub.
Well, you can lay down and do your snow angel. You can go in the hot tub.
So yeah,
None of my body wants to sit in this position.
So give yourself so open up your arms and legs a little bit more. Let the cold come in. The cold, as Wim Hof says,
that's much better.
Is the window to the soul.
Totally different. It's like night and day.
And now just relax. And let
It's warm in here.
Let the dog jump on you.
It's cold.
You think?
So why don't you let's give ourselves like a sort of a time, like another 30 seconds or minute. Go back into the snow, just so you have a goal and an outcome.
Let's do 30 seconds.
No, go back
We're
into
lean
the
back
snow
and do
angel.
snow angels.
No.
Yes.
As opposed to like at random, like it's going to end soon, but I don't know when. That's more.
I want to hear that random thing you just said.
Random? It's going to end soon, but I don't know when.
Okay, 15.
No, I mean like it's going to end in like blank.
Exactly.
And answer the
30
question.
seconds.
You'd like
30
30
seconds.
30 seconds.
For what?
Till we do our snow angel.
And then what after that?
Then we'll go in the hot tub.
We'll warm up.
How long in the snow angel?
You just do a snow angel and then you
As long
get
as
up.
it looks
Oh,
good.
I like that. Okay. Yeah, I like it.
Okay, keep breathing a little bit here.
All right,
refocus.
breathing. So I have to do the breathing.
You forgot to
It's
breathe.
ancestral. So muscles open in your fingers and toes.
This is awesome.
You're probably already starting to adapt.
Yeah. I'm imagining my back against the snow. It's awesome.
We'll do the backs in 5 seconds.
No. You're the boss.
4,
Okay. It is starting to. I am getting used to it.
3, 2,
Yeah.
1. Lay back. And start.
Oh no! Okay. Oh, Lord Jesus, you're a guest.
Let your breathing relax.
And then what?
Okay.
What are we doing next?
We're going to go in the hot tub.
Yeah, thank you, Lord. No.
Oh, I gotta open it, Tim.
Oh, yeah. I love you, hot tub. I love you, hot tub.
Does it burn?
Oh, it's so good.
Like a bunch of needles?
Well, that was part two of our
The
Dr.
Deuce.
Daniel Chenier interview.
The deuce.
What do you think of it, Greg?
I thought it was great because like some of the stuff that he teaches in terms of like eating and eating healthy,
Yeah.
I don't know if you completely agree with it because you eat leafy greens, you eat the stuff that comes out of the ground, and he says in moderation it's great for medicine, it's great, but is it really great for you to be eating on a regular basis?
Right, and that was maybe the most controversial thing we talked about because most people, when they grow up, they're taught to eat their vegetables, and the more green, the better, right? That's what you're brought up. But he started talking about how some of those things that we've been taught to believe aren't necessarily true. And that's the case in many things in health. We talked about cheese a number of episodes ago. We kind of touched on.
We talked about the thing we don't talk about.
Because we talked about that. Where sometimes we're led to believe things are good for us that aren't necessarily good for us, but for economic reasons.
We talked about the milk that one time, and it was more so the government pushing milk onto everybody as opposed to it being good for you.
So agree or disagree with some of the comments. Listen to it because it's a conversation. This is
they did listen to it.
Yeah, this is kind of our aim as people that talk to guests is to get a wide a range of opinions. Yeah. And sometimes you might not agree with it, and sometimes you might not agree with Dr. Dan or Greg or myself, but that's okay.
Can we all agree on one thing?
What's that?
When you went into the snow, you cried like a baby.
You have to, and you did watch it, but show your friends, because I admit, I cried like a baby.
We're going to clip that. We're going to share it with all of our friends' earballs and eyeballs.
If you watch in part one, or I think it's part one, the other story in Vancouver, where
it's in part two too.
It's part two.
Yeah.
But yeah, the snow. I was so cold, and the other thing was, the problem was nobody told me how long we'd be there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it was 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it wasn't that long. If I knew it was going to...
I think it was like 4 or 5 minutes.
If I knew it was 4 minutes, I could have probably, but I didn't know how much. I remember the moment I got to the hot tub. I was so happy. It was so cold.
Thanks for watching this episode. We've got new episodes coming out every Friday at
8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time.
In the morning.
Yep.
So check it out.
Bright and early.
You can drive to work and listen to the Greg and Tim Show.
Yeah.
And then you can drive home and listen to it again.
Yeah.
Because you probably missed a few episodes. Because this is like episode 20-something. I don't even know what episode number this is anymore. We're just flying through them. It's like a whole new world.
Well, you don't know exactly what episode it is, because it depends on what Mandela effect you're involved in.
Yeah.
Or what multiverse.
Which multiverse you're living in.
It could be 22. It could be 29.
We're going to cut it out on that, guy. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week. Cheerio, Tim.
Shreddies.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the Greg and Tim Show podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Sharing is caring.